When I was looking at today's gospel, though, it had me thinking. When I was growing up as a kid, whether it be at school, at church, in the family, wherever it was, I realized that I broke a lot of rules. I was the kid. You would basically say I was a bad kid. I was a little terror. Basically, I was the one that would constantly have to do punish work. When it came to Mass on Sundays, I was the kid that, like, whenever we would walk in, I wanted to, like, play with the water in the holy water font, right? Like, and just splash it around a little bit. Smuggle toy cars into the pews. We may have heard that story before. I was the one that, like, when I was in school and when a teacher told us to do something, I always tried to push the envelope just a little bit, right? Basically, the problem was that I was just a terror, and I was just like my older sister. No. What the real problem was I was a little. So two things. Number one, I was loud, so I always got caught. And number two, I was too smart for my own good. Right? So it was just a little bit mischievous, kind of finding things to do. I remember there was one time. We were at one point we used to like trade baseball cards and football cards and basketball cards. So I remember one Monday I had like my binder with all my baseball cards. All my friends were going to bring our baseball cards to school. We're going to trade. We're going to do all this stuff. Teachers walk up and they're like, no, that's going to turn into a fight, and they confiscated our baseball cards. So they were like, do not bring baseball cards back to school. We were like, okay. The next day, brought basketball cards, right? The next day, brought football cards. All of them got confiscated. My dad was like, where's all your stuff? And I was like, oh, here's a note. You have to go pick them up from school. And he's like, I explained it to him, and he's like, I can't even be mad. You're just dumb. Anyway, so I just remember like as a kid, though, oftentimes, I was the one that was a little bit too loud. I would do the wrong thing. I spent many a recess by the punishment wall because every elementary school has one. I think there's a plaque next to mine where I used to stand, right? Like, it was just like, it was a normal thing. So whenever I did something right, when I was good in church, or when I was good and like I followed the golden rule, or I just walked away like my mom would tell me, right? When I would finally do the thing right, I'll be completely honest, because it happened so few and far in between, I always expected like some affirmation for it, right? Like kids picking on me or fighting with me at like playing sports or something at recess, and it's like I'm gonna just walk away and be like, okay, and then I'd walk away and be like, okay, where's the party, right? Is this supposed to feel bad? I'm not supposed to be angry still. I'm supposed to like have somebody like a teacher come up to me and be like, good job, way to go. And there was like, it wasn't there, right? I think there's something in us that we want, whenever we do right, we want it to be noticed. I think every one of us at some point, when we do right, when we do the thing that we're supposed to do, right? Whenever we follow whatever it is that God is asking of us, or our family is asking of us, or our teachers are asking of us, or whatever, right? Our boss is asking of us, we want the affirmation. Now, what can happen sometimes, when what I think has happened like in the last 15, 20 years, is we find that affirmation in different ways. Some of us might be like, if you like to cook, right? We might serve some food, and then we start doing like the little thing where we hover over people and be like, how's that gumbo, huh? Uh-huh. You like that? You like that? Because we want to hear the ego talk to us about how good the gumbo is. Oh, it's better than my dad's? Thanks. Yeah, that's what I like to hear, right? Like, but like, we like to hear these kind of things. We like to see this kind of affirmation. This is where social media comes in, right? The last 20 years, like that's really likes, hearts, the analytics that people follow. A lot of times people define their value, they define their goodness or whatever by whatever they see on social media. It's basically a desire for affirmation that's now digitized, and we have the data for it right behind it. I'm not going to just tear into social media, but we just see this dynamic that's still there. I think Jesus in today's gospel is even touching on that point. This desire for affirmation. This desire to be affirmed, the attaboys, like good job, right? Like that's what the apostles are looking at Jesus and asking about. In our gospel today, actually, it's interesting because if we want to situate the gospels, because we got to remember that these things didn't happen. The book is not just a bunch of little sections that are segmented off. It's meant to be read as a complete story, and there's teachings that build one week to another or one chapter to another. So last week, if you remember, our gospel was the rich man and Lazarus. That this rich man, right, he dies and goes to heaven. He dies and goes to hell. Lazarus dies and he goes to heaven at the bosom of Abraham with God and of Abraham and everything. And there's this conversation between the rich man and God. And basically what happens is it says like there's a finality to life. You're going to go one way or another. There's a finality to life here. And there is no crossing after the fact, right? There is no second chance. There's not a mulligan on this. Like you don't get to just like reshoot. You don't get to retry. There's a finality here. And what Jesus ends by telling the rich man is that because the rich man wants to go out back and warn his family and warn his brothers and all these people and wants to like make sure that they know, hey, you need to listen to what it is that like the Gospels are saying or what or like the Old Testament is saying, what Moses is saying, what the prophets have said, right? And what we would believe is the Gospels and what Jesus Christ has said, right? Like the rich man wants to go back and he wants to warn, and God says, no, I'm sorry. The sources are there for people to listen to. There's a finality to this. Today's gospel begins where that left off, right? So the apostles look at Jesus today, and their claim, their question to Jesus, they say, Lord, increase our faith. They don't want to find themselves in the same spot that the rich man was. Increase our faith. We get this very, very popular kind of image of if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you would tell this mulberry tree to stand up and it would go, and you would say it to be planted in the water and it would move and it would go, right? Faith the size of a mustard seed moves mountains, whatever, different ways that people have said those kind of phrases. It's a very popular image. But I think it's more interesting what Jesus says after that. Because what he builds on after that is this story of this rich man, this landowner, and his servants. And what Jesus is doing is he's picking on something, like he's using an image that was very, very popular and was very, very well known, right? That somebody who had an estate, had fields, that had people that were out in the fields working, their servants, right? That the servants would be out there working in the fields. And what happened is that at the end of the day, the servants would come in, and Jesus kind of throws out a ridiculous thing. He says these servants would come in. Who would see this happening? This is a little bit ridiculous, that these servants would come in, and as they would come in, that the landowner would say, no, you go eat first. No, that's not what happens. Then he turns around and he says, because what happens is the landowner eats first. The servants serve him. Then once he's done, they can all sit and eat. But there's no attaboys to be given. There's no good jobs to be given because it is their job. The last line of today's gospel is a telling line. It's a very, very telling line. We are unprofitable servants. We have done what we were obliged to do. As I was looking at today's gospel and I was thinking about this, I remember when I was first ordained, it was a couple of months after I was ordained a priest, and I had been in my parish for maybe 2 or 3 months. I was in Cutoff. I was with Father Greg Fratt at Sacred Heart in Cutoff. Good time, right? We had a blast. It was really great. But I remember like that first couple of months in particular, I'm like trying to learn how to be a priest. Right? Like, so like what that means is I got to like get on a schedule of what time do I have to get to the church to get ready to be in confessions on time. I still haven't learned that, but it's okay. All right? Like, we have to like where do I stand and how do we like do things on the altar, and like I need to work with a funeral, and I need to do like I was just doing a lot of firsts, right? Baptisms and marriage prep and all this kind of stuff. And it was just something that was new. How do I work with like youth ministry? I don't know what that looks like now on this side of being a priest, and all these kind of things, sick calls and stuff. So it was just a lot of new very, very quickly. So I remember when I was in this parish, I'm struggling with this a little bit, and it just felt like a lot of things were piling up. So I was on the phone with my spiritual director one day, and I remember we were going back and forth. My spiritual director at the time was Father Vinny Fortunato. With a name like that, you could tell he's Cajun, right? Anyway, he was a little Italian monk from Hoboken, New Jersey, right? All New York, right? Like as much New York as you can imagine. He's a Yankee fan. You need to pray for him for his conversion, but we're going to talk about that another time. But like I just remember I was on the phone with him, and I'm telling him, I'm like, look, Vinny, like as I'm doing, it's weird. It's like a hitman. But anyway, it's like, I'm like, Vinny, listen. I tell him, like, this is what's going on. I just feel like overwhelmed. I feel like, and I use this image, I said, I'm sitting at a desk. And as I'm at this desk, I have like all these folders and all these paper, kind of like what you would see on a cartoon, right? Like I was just like, I got stacks of stuff all over my desk. It's a mess. Things are crazy. I'm getting phone calls. I'm like, all these things are going on. And there's like one for marriage prep and one for youth ministry and one for like your own personal holy hour and trying to eat not, Taco Bell for 27 meals every week. Like all these kind of things. Like I think that's how many meals, but anyway. But like, I was just like, I had all these things, and I'm just like, it's just like this mountain of work. All these things are on top. Like, I'm stressed, and I don't know what I'm doing, and trying to balance all this. And I said, as I'm sitting there with all this, Jesus is like by the door. And I look at Jesus, and I'm like, look, here's this, here's this. Here's this folder, here's this stuff, right? You handle these things. You handle the 14 homilies that I have to do, and you handle the marriage prep I have to do, and you handle taking care of that family and that sick person I'm supposed to pray for, but I keep forgetting, right? Like, you handle all these things, and I'll take care of the other stuff. And as I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I'm sharing my heart, and I'm all like stressed out, I hear on the other side him just laughing at me. And he's laughing, and I'm like, well, thanks. And he goes, he said, you don't realize what's going on, huh? I said, no. He says, you're an idiot. I was like, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I really don't know which way is up. But he just says, your picture's backwards. So what you mean? He says, you think you're the boss. In that image, with the way you have it like played out, you think because you're sitting in the chair behind the desk that you're the boss. You're not in charge. You work for the Lord. He said, basically think of it this way. He said, you are a little kid that is sitting in his dad's chair, and his dad's standing there just like, okay, you can get out anytime. But you think you're in charge. That's the image that Jesus, I think, is tapping into today. The servant is the servant. The servant has a thing to do. The servant serves the master, right? That's very simply, that is their job. When the master comes in, the servants come in from the fields. And when the servants come in from the field, what do? They serve the master. They only do what the master tells them. What we hear in our gospel, like the last line, we hear that beautiful image, right? We are unprofitable servants. We have done what we were obliged to do. We have done what we were commanded to do. Another translation of the Bible says, we are useless servants. I don't like that. We are useless servants. Because we have simply done what we were obliged, what we were commanded, what we were asked to do by the Lord. When the apostles asked Jesus to say, like, increase our faith, this is what he points to. He says, do my will and nothing else. Do my will, follow me, only what I ask you, and don't think that it's your work. Because you're not in charge. You're not in charge. The apostles asked to increase our faith today. That's their request to Jesus. Increase our faith. That word faith, I think, in our English language, in our culture today, in our world today, a lot of times we can say we have faith in something. What I think we say is we have this like intellectual assent to something, right? That we affirm something, that we say yes to something. That very simply, I believe that thing, or I want that thing, right? We have faith in something, right? When we stand up in a couple of minutes, we're going to all say the creed together, and right, it's the profession of faith. Right? And we're going to say with our mouths all together, herd mentality. Everybody's going to stand up and I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. And it's the one prayer that if we try and say by ourselves, we probably can't because we're going to mess it up because we just do it herd mentality. But anyway, like what's going to happen is that we will say it with our lips. But the idea of biblical faith, like the word in the Old Testament today, in Habakkuk that we heard in our first reading, the word faith that we hear at the very end of that is better translated faithfulness. It's not just an intellectual assent to something. It's not just saying, I believe it's something. It's not just saying, I agree with something. What we're saying is a faithfulness. The rash one has no integrity, but the just one, because of his faith or his faithfulness, shall live. Now we might think, oh, what's the difference? One is just I check off a list of things that I believe, right? One is I look at the creed and I say, yeah, I believe that, I believe that, I believe that, I believe that. The second one, though, faithfulness, is whenever we say, no, I believe it, therefore I follow, therefore I do. Therefore it changes me. Faithfulness is a posture. It's a way of life. The last 2 weeks I've had a chance to do a couple of weddings, and they're weddings that like people, the couples have gotten, like they get it. It's been really beautiful to see. When a husband and wife on their wedding day say the vows, they're not just saying, yeah, I agree with that. For better or worse, for richer or poorer, for death do us part. I agree with that. Their yes to each other is a yes of saying, I'm going to be faithful to this person. Not just that I believe this person loves me and that I believe I love this person, but I'm going to, with my person, with everything that I am for the rest of my life, I'm going to pour out my life for this person. It's a massive difference between saying faith as in a yes, check it off, sure, and faithfulness that says, I'm willing to pour myself out for the other. You see, when we come to Mass, we are responding to God with a yes of faithfulness. Faithfulness is a relationship. Faithfulness is an ongoing thing. Faithfulness changes everything about what we prioritize and how we approach struggle, how we approach joy, how we approach the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. Faithfulness is whenever we have a posture of being in relationship with God and not moving. I'm here with you. I go nowhere except where you want me to go. It's very different than just checking off boxes and possible empty words. When we come to Mass, we're responding to God, who has been faithful to us since the beginning of our lives, faithful to us since the crucifixion, faithful to us since the creation of the universe, that we have a God who has loved us and poured himself out for us, and our response is very simply, yes, back. I love you too. This is our response when we come to Mass. When we come to pray, it's our response back to God. When we come to confession, it's our response back to God. Every time we're in relationship with God, it's a yes. It's an ongoing yes of faithfulness. Today as we come to Mass, may we not look for the attaboys and the way to goes when we do something good. Made it to Mass this week. Yes, right? Good, very good. But we don't do it for attaboys. We don't do it for the good jobs, gold stars, for the likes. We do it so that we can be in relationship with our God. That we can respond faithfully to God, who has loved us first, who has invited us first, who's come to meet us first. May today our profession of faith, our act of faith of being here, not just be a yes and a checkbox, but may it be an ongoing yes of faithfulness to our God.